Hello, colleagues and friends. If we haven't met before, my name is Jana Williamson, and welcome to my home piano studio in the suburbs of Chicago. Today, for an Ask Me Anything video, I am answering the question, do you teach piano to your own children? And if you do, how do you do it? I see this question come up a lot in Facebook forums and elsewhere. And the truth is that yes, I do teach some of my own children, and I thought it would be good to answer it here. I wrote a blog post on this originally about 2.5 years ago, and I will link that. And as I'm publishing this video, I'm also publishing an update to that. So many of you YouTube audience members may not actually know that I have 4 kids of my own. And right now, as I videotape this, they are 20, 16, 14, and 10, although the 10-year-old is about to be 11. She has a summer birthday. So currently I teach number 2 and number 4, and I did teach my oldest before he left for college. I don't teach my 14-year-old. He has always gone to another teacher. We do not always work well together, and so it's been much better for our relationship if I send him to someone else and I just get to be mom with him and not also his teacher. So the reason that I have taught so many years of my own kids, there are a few reasons. Number one, it's just a matter of cost. Piano lessons are expensive, and it's hard for me to pay someone else to do the exact thing that I do best. But along those lines, I also want to give my children what I give to other people's children. I want to be part of their music education. And I certainly can be part of their music education without being their primary piano teacher. But I have found that it's been really overall a wonderful thing to be leading that from the piano perspective with my own kids. I will say my kids are fantastic musicians. This is a nature versus nurture debate. My husband is also a musician, and so there's always music in the house, and genetically they come from a very strong musician pool. So they were given that gift just in their genes, and they have lived in a house with a lot of music and a lot of music education. Now, I'm going to switch gears and not talk about my kids anymore. I kind of gave you a few ideas on why I've chosen to teach my own children, but I'm now just going to talk about some general advice I would give anyone who's considering teaching their own children or anyone who is struggling to teach their own children. It is not easy. There are some definite difficulties in it. And so anyway, these are just some suggestions, some pieces of advice, or words from someone who has taught their own kids for a long time. Number 1, try to set a regular lesson time. This can be really hard, and I will say that my 16-year-old and I finally, this past year, his sophomore year of high school, finally found a time that worked really well for both of us, and we were the most consistent in his lessons this year than we ever have been. But setting aside, even if it's not a regular time, setting aside the time that is the lesson allows you as the parent to be in teacher mode and expect your child to act as if you are their teacher and not as if you are their parent for that 45 minutes or whatever you've set aside for the weekly lesson. At times outside of that lesson time, when your child is practicing, try to remain aloof and disconnected. If your child is young enough that they need parental help in practicing, then absolutely find out if your spouse or even an older sibling can help them do that as opposed to you doing it, so that you can be truly the teacher as much as you would be that for another student. Recreate that as much as you can. Similarly to that, listening to your own child practice can often be really maddening. I might know this from experience because practicing is generally not really a beautiful thing most of the time for most people, myself included. And they might be making repetitive mistakes or not using the practice techniques that you ask them to use. So with the exception of, I sometimes come in and just say, hey, I think you're missing an F sharp throughout this whole page, just so they don't spend the entire week without the key signature. With the exception of something small like that, I generally try to steer clear of my kids practicing. I will shower during that time. I will go outside and take a walk during that time. I will put in headphones and do something else so that I really am trying to remove myself from listening as much as I possibly can. When your child is young and starting off his or her musical journey, it's really great if you can start them in some sort of group curriculum first before beginning private lessons with you if you are going to be their teacher. This just sets up that music is something that we do regularly on a weekly basis with other people. And particularly if they do any kind of group piano or keyboard instruction, then they're going to see that other people have to go home and practice too, and the teacher interacts with them in the same way that they do with your child. I had the huge blessing of working at a Yamaha school for the years when all of my children were young, so they all were in class with either me or one of my colleagues and started off that way, so that then when they transitioned to private lessons, they were already in the groove of going to class and practicing between classes. As much as possible, try to get input from other teachers on your own child's playing. Of course, we know that having other people evaluate our students playing, all of our students, is beneficial. We can easily have blind spots in our teaching, so sending students to festivals and exams, master classes, all those kinds of things where you get outside input, that can be helpful for everyone, but it's particularly helpful for your own child because it's even easier to have blind spots about your own kid. Plus, in my experience, my own children are the ones who get less lessons than everybody else. So I have taken advantage of as many outside opportunities as I could for my own children so they get more outside input than just their mom. I also like to take advantage of all sorts of other musical opportunities for my children. So all of my children play a second instrument at this point, and my 16-year-old actually plays 3 instruments, and they all sing. So they're getting a lot of musical input and musical experiences outside of just the private piano lesson. Now, my kids are all have a very high aptitude for musicality, and they're all geared towards this. So they're going to want to be in school band and sing in the church choir. And your child may not, and that's okay. That's going to be a different thing. But if your child is musically inclined, then try out a second instrument. And eventually they get to decide, is piano their thing or is flute their thing, or whatever their instrument is. Along those lines, if your child does a second instrument, at some point you have to be willing to let them let go of piano or help them decide what their primary focus is going to be. We all know from teaching busy teenagers that it's really, really hard to keep up 2 instruments or a lot of musical activities all at the same time. So before my older 2, went to high school, we had a conversation about, okay, what is your primary instrument going to be? Talked about playing their other instrument besides piano in the school band or school orchestra. Talked about, were they going to continue lessons on that other instrument, or was it really going to be their school instrument and make piano more their priority? And you have to be willing to have a really frank and good conversation with your child about that. And if they don't pick piano, as much as this would be difficult for me, it would allow them to make that choice and then reevaluate it periodically as well. As much as you can, try to make music making fun in your house. We have a lot of fun in our house, and I do find my kids improvising and messing around with each other. At one point, we had a digital piano in here in addition to my grand, and I would find one kid on each keyboard, and they would duel things out. If you can sing silly songs in your house or find duets for siblings to play that are fun, more popular tunes, anything like that that's going to up the fun factor for music in general in your family, the better it will be, and keep it from being this serious thing that only happens in lessons with mom or dad. All right, now we're going to get to the serious advice. Practice patience. Patience is not something we're born with. It is a virtue that must be cultivated. And if you are a person of faith, it's something that we have to pray for on a regular basis. I am continually praying for more patience and taking deep breaths as I work with my children at the piano. Avoid living vicariously through your children. This is hard whether you teach them or not. And I have to remind myself that my children have their own lives and their musical successes or failures are their own. And while of course they do reflect on me as their teacher, they are still their own people and I am not living through them. It's very important to apologize whenever you make a mistake or lose your temper. I have had to apologize multiple times. And lastly, we have to try to treat our own children as we would treat any student in our studio. So I always use the phrase, be a student of your student. Same thing goes for my own kids. I have to figure out what my daughter really enjoys playing and what repertoire she would just love to perform. And then also I have to know her weaknesses and be realistic about what's missing in her progression right now. What is she not able to do very well? And then give her repertoire and exercises to build her up in those areas. So any tactic I would take towards planning with one of my students who does not share my own genetic code, I need to take that same attention and time and care towards my own children. All right, I hope this has helped. If you have questions about teaching your own kids, if you've had struggles, please feel free to leave a comment. It is not easy. I am not trying to say it is, and it doesn't work with every kid. I don't teach all of my children. So I'd love to hear from you, your own experience. Let me know if you have more questions that I didn't answer. And best wishes in all your teaching.